Tonight, Hurricane Bonnie quickly strengthening as Aere is continuing to affect Japan. And now the latest around the wide world of tropics. Tropical Weather Bulletin for July 5th. Well, here we are around the wide world of tropics, and we have two systems active. Things are getting quieter once again. We have Hurricane Bonnie, which has continued to strengthen, now at Category 2, with Tropical Depression Aere bringing impacts to Japan as we speak. We're up to 34 storms so far this year, with 92 being the average in a total year. Looking at the Atlantic, it's day 35 of hurricane season. There's nothing going on besides the consistent amount of fireworks going on across the United States as we speak. I'm sure half of them are legal, but at this point it's the 4th of July here, who cares? And there are fireworks going outside my house. If they stick their way in, I apologize. In the Eastern Pacific, we have Hurricane Bonnie, which is continuing to intensify, a Category 2 on this 52nd day of hurricane season. It's expected to strengthen a little bit further, could get close to major status, and it would be ironically hilarious if it ends up becoming the strongest storm of the year so far, given that would mean it would have to be a donation storm from the Atlantic. In the Western Pacific, Aere continues to bring heavy rainfall across portions of Japan, and that's going to be the trend for the next several days, as Aere doesn't seem to be going anywhere anytime soon, despite the fact it is about to become post-tropical. The impacts will still linger on for just a bit longer. In the North Indian Ocean, it's the same story here, nothing going on. There is not much going on, but in terms of heavy rain, that's always the case given the fact it is monsoon season, and that's what we typically see this time of year, so flash flooding concerns, of course, always remaining the case in the summer here. Here's a satellite imagery of Hurricane Bonnie. You can see an eye there. A bit of a debate as to whether it is going through a merger eyewall replacement cycle right now, which would be interesting given the fact that could help intensify it further, given the fact that eyewall replacement cycles like these do prevent it from weakening much. And you can see it's been looking pretty good. Bonnie is definitely one of the healthier storms we've seen in the Eastern Pacific and Atlantic combined this year. Here's the Atlantic satellite imagery, and you can see what's going on. Not much frontal system that kind of also absorbed Colin, continuing to move off across into the Atlantic. Other than that, not much going on. A tropical wave that is currently exiting the African coastline. In the Eastern Pacific, you can see the ragged eye that Bonnie had earlier today. It has a really small eye at the moment that's not really fully visible, but you can see that it is still trying. Definitely a healthy storm that we're seeing from Bonnie here right now. In the Western Pacific, you can see it's a bit of a mess with a bunch of monsoonal activity going on. You can see the remnants of Chaba as well, continuing to bring heavy rain while moving at a very slow speed, about 5 miles an hour inland. You can also see the convection burst that Aere had earlier. In the North Indian Ocean, it is a mess too between the monsoonal activity. Arabian Sea and Bay of Bengal both getting into some heavy monsoonal rains right now, so a lot of cloud cover for central and southern India, opposite for the southwestern Indian Ocean, where it's completely dry with nothing expected in the next 5 days, so expecting things to remain pretty quiet for quite a while here. In the Australian region, nothing going on either. There's some cloud cover going on in the eastern coast of Australia, but other than that, the rest of the basin looks pretty quiet. Completely dry Western Australia and completely dry as you go into the South Pacific. Here are the sea surface temperatures, and you can see in the Eastern Pacific the temperatures are around 28 to some areas of 29. As you go into the Central Pacific, those temperatures do of course decrease. In the Gulf of Mexico, the temperatures are around 29 to 30 degrees Celsius, with those 30 degrees Celsius temperatures continuing to expand. It's around 27 to 28 in the Caribbean, and it's around 27 to 28 in the main development region, as well as the Western Atlantic. You can kind of see a little bit of a divot where Bonnie tracked over, but it's not really that noticeable yet. In the Bay of Bengal, the temperatures are around 28 to 29 for the entirety of the region. As you go into the Arabian Sea, the temperatures are around 28 to 29 degrees Celsius in the northeastern part of the basin. As you head southwest, those temperatures do decrease. In the Western Pacific, it's around 28 to 29, with those 30 degrees Celsius temperatures now are more or less confined to the areas near the Philippines, given the fact that those 30 degrees Celsius temperatures did take a loss after Aere and Chaba passed through a good chunk of those pockets. In the southern hemisphere, we are looking at the temperatures remaining around 26 to 27 in the Australian region and going down to 25 in the southwest Indian Ocean. So here we are in terms of the sea surface temp anomalies, and you can see the Atlantic is still looking above average, with some more areas below average in the subtropics, Eastern Pacific is looking pretty good, below average right now. Western Pacific above average, especially in the South China Sea, and North Indian Ocean looking slightly above average at the moment. Ocean heat content, the Caribbean continues to expand in terms of its high OHC values, while the eastern Gulf of Mexico death spot continues to exist. And the Western Pacific, you can see what's going on in regards to the OHC there, quite a bit as you head east of the Philippines and towards the low latitudes. Eastern Pacific in general still not looking too great at the moment. So, looking at the AT&Z GFS run provided by Tropical Tidbits, you can see what ends up of Bonnie. It continues to strengthen despite the fact that the GFS initialized is about 20 millibars too weak, having it not reach what its actual intensity is for another 54 hours, which is interesting. So I'd say we could probably strengthen this a bit. I'm not sure what's going on with the GFS. I think we can already tell the AT&Z run is kind of not great as per usual. And yeah, that's pretty much what we've got. It looks like the GFS is no longer developing that disturbance by hour 120. Looks like they have delayed the formation of that yet again. And as we head into the Western Pacific, you can see what goes on there. Looks like there is nothing, and if you hear fireworks going on in the background of my noise, welcome to the 4th of July here, even though this is for the 5th. You can see what goes on with the Western Pacific side of things. Looks like they try to develop a tropical depression to the east of the Philippines in about 24 hours, or 48 to 72 hours, but that doesn't really do anything. The remnants of Aere eventually turning extropical, continue to bring some outer band rainfall towards the eastern coast of Japan. Well, it looks like another thing could also be setting up towards the end of the week on Saturday. Looking at the longer range, we'll start off with the Western Pacific first, since that was what we were looking at. And you can see what ends up of that Western Pacific thing. It looks like it decides to become a typhoon. It's the same disturbance that we were tracking last night, but it looks like the GFS has actually become reasonable on that front, now peaking it as a Category 2, before ending up curving off to the northeast, bringing some rain in Japan, but keeping most of the impacts off. And then eventually it's gone. Well, it looks like another thing tries to be developing near the Mariana Islands at hour 240 in standard GFS tradition. We'll get into that in the Scillian range, but in the meantime, we have the Eastern Pacific to look at. Of course, Bonnie is going to end up weakening inevitably by the weekend and should eventually dissipate by the beginning of next week. There's also disturbance that the GFS keeps trying to develop to the west of Baja California, but it really wouldn't be that strong. Of course, GFS says otherwise, decides to take it up to Category 2 strength before eventually weakening it off and killing it by July 14th. Again, this is long range. GFS keeps delaying it. Models kind of want it, but it's probably not going to be as strong as the GFS suggests. Remember, you can check out our Force 13 store if you want to request animations for some reason, or buy some of our shirts or stuff with logos on it. And just remember, if you feel like sleeping on us, you can buy a pillow, so that way you can have a dream of Hone on it. So, looking at the Scilly range, we go back to the Western Pacific where we left off at hour 240. And you can see what ends up of this new disturbance as the old one decays. And needless to say, it takes a bit to get going, as it probably should with large disturbance like that was. And by hour 306, we have a full-blown tropical storm that's pretty large, while rains are practically happening on specifically the Philippines, and only the Philippines, and not really much of the coastal area around it. That is interesting to see. But as you can see, eventually, it decides to become a typhoon, and now it's a Cat 3, and okay. Yep, there we go. There's GFS back into shenanigans, making a nice bullseye towards Taiwan, and yep, 943 millibars. That is yep, yep, yeah, no, we're skipping this again. I'm sick and tired of watching hour 384 runs with GFS deciding to casually spin up a Category 4 typhoon to hit somewhere. We're just gonna skip it and not give it the attention it deserves. Looking at on this day, we are going way far back to July 5th, 1916, to Hurricane 2, which made landfall in the Gulf of Mexico, of course. Looks like Mississippi, I believe, is where it made landfall as a Category 3, bringing about $12 million of damage and killing over at least 34 people. and contributing to some significant flooding in the southeast U.S. coast. No other storms were active, nor do we probably have any records for anything if they were anything, so we don't even know what else was active. But you can find more of our on-the-state products powered by Cyclone History by going to the bottom bar below. Well, looking at the next names, the next up name in the Atlantic is Danielle, followed by Earl. In the Eastern Pacific, we're looking out for Darby and Estelle. And in the Central Pacific, while fireworks may keep you up all night, we can tell you that the night Hone finally forms is probably going to be something that keeps everyone up all night as well. In the Western Pacific, the next two names here are Songda, followed by Trazes. In the North Indian Ocean, the next two names here are Sitrang, followed by Mandus. And I keep on hearing fireworks outside of my house right now. It is great. I'm hoping this didn't make it through. I don't know until after the fact. In the Australian region, we're looking out for Darian and Ellie. In the southwestern Indian Ocean, we're looking out for Ashley and Belita. And in the South Pacific, we're looking out for Holly. We'll be back for our TWB without fireworks tomorrow night.